Hey everyone, welcome to episode 2 of the Wandering Thread podcast. Still kind of adjusting to the first episode that I put out. So for those of you who watched my first episode, thank you so much because the feedback from that has been excellent. And it's sort of good for me to see how much of my audience resonates with me, because I think there are probably a lot of us out there that are undiagnosed autistic, and these kinds of experiences resonate with them as well. So that was part of the reason why I started to kind of lean more into reading other people's testimonials about various experiences in their life, because I was like, this sounds exactly like me. So so the feedback from that has been really great, and I'm very appreciative of all of the words of encouragement. And I just wanted to put a disclaimer out really quickly, because I don't think I mentioned this in the first episode, but this is purely my form of therapy. So I wanted to talk a little bit about my experience with trying to understand what autism might be like for me. So I'm still on the waiting list to get a formal diagnosis, or at least I'm on the list to get an assessment for a diagnosis. And in the meantime, I thought this would be a really great way to kind of review my life and contextualize things that happened in the past and do research, even though I've already done a lot of research, but to kind of pair my awareness now of both autism and my past and kind of see, well, does it align? Does it not align? Because there's some contention that people have about people who are self-diagnosed. This is not a very blasé thing for me. This is the result of careful research and really letting that evaluation process be the foregrounded part of what I'm doing. So it is valid. A lot of autistic centers will accept the self-diagnosed as a valid form of diagnosis, because doctors can't catch everything. And with myself also being a doctor, although of archaeology, I have a lot of background in understanding people, their perspectives, psychology, philosophy, different perspectives of different cultures throughout the world, not just from the Western point of view. So it does kind of prime me for analyzing how this might actually be me. And so I don't want to diminish the importance of self-diagnosis, because if you are thinking you might be, it's definitely something where if you're kind of on that track anyway, this could be really useful for a doctor to hear, these are the things that I've read about, these are the things in my history that I want to talk about, so that when you do go to an analysis, when you do go to an assessment, goodness, you might be able to get better feedback. So I don't really think it's a losing situation to be in. So I just wanted to put this out there that this is my experience. I'm not trying to diagnose anybody else or to create a tutorial for diagnosis. So that's basically where I am. Now, while I'm doing this work today, I've brought some things to do while I'm talking, because I find that it really helps me to be just a little bit distracted, and I can talk about things that might be really complex without feeling like I lose fluency, which is probably something else to consider. If this happens to you, please let me know, because I would be fascinating to hear if you need to be just a tiny bit distracted in order to focus better. So essentially, I've got this huge couples sweater project that I'm doing, and I've got a bunch of wool up there that's already spun, ready to go, and then I've got this left over from that batch, so I can do the next 6 or so skeins. And I've got all these little bundles here of hand pulled bits of fiber that I'm going to spin. So this is sort of like the ready to go stage, and here are the bats. And even though I don't always do this for every project, I find that it's easier for me to just do it in big bulks. So make a bunch of fiber that's ready to spin, and then I just do a bunch of spinning. And because this fleece was free, it was given to me, I did some good processing with it, but it wasn't a super clean set of fleeces anyway. So I'm literally just going to be pulling out strips about this big. And you can kind of see, even with carding it 3 times, it needs a bit more work. So yeah, I'm just gonna be doing this as I'm talking. So the topic I wanted to talk about today has to do with my health. And while I was sick with the flu earlier this year, it gave me not really a scare, but it was very concerning because I've never been quite so sick before in my life. I was the kind of never really ill with anything. Never broke a bone. I didn't have any other like genetic or congenital issues to deal with. I had no allergies. I was very, very healthy, except for I got a lot of sinus infections, a lot of strep throat, and it got to be so bad that by the time I was 5, doctors were concerned that I might need hearing aids because of the frequency and intensity of my sinus infections and strep throat and things like that would cause infections to my ears. And they recommended, I mean this was the 80s, but they recommended that I just get my tonsils and adenoids removed so that there was nowhere for strep to grow. And it's not something that I think doctors even then would recommend just across the board. Oh, you've had it a few times, we'll just take care of it. So that was, and really is, the only major surgery I've ever had in my life. I had my wisdom teeth removed, but that was, what, an hour in the office? And another funny story maybe I'll tell later. So it helped, but I was still regularly afflicted with sinus infections and ear infections. They were just less severe as I got older. But I remember so many times laying in bed with excruciating pain, just trying to not cry, because I knew the second I started crying, it would make everything worse. And then, of course, my parents would tell me, don't cry, it'll hurt more. Well, yeah, I know, but the pain was just too much for me to tolerate. And what seemed to help was literally having my ear pressed up to a warm body. So unfortunately, my mom had a lot of sleepless nights when I was a kid because I was in a lot of pain, and that was literally the only thing that brought me comfort. In hindsight, I think the comfort came in the form of just someone else going through this experience with me. But I would regularly have sinus infections at the start of the school year. So it wouldn't be like a cute little, sick for a few days. It would always be a month of just being infected a couple of times. And then by the time it got to picture day, I was exhausted, I looked haggard, and I usually had fever blisters. So for those of you who know what cold sores are, I always had them, and whenever I got sick, my body being kind of run down, I would break out. And my parents always crossed their fingers hoping I would be fine, But then, boom, I'd be sick, and then literally 2 days before picture day, boom, there's a fever blister. So most of the time they could get the picture retake and I would be okay. But it was almost every single year until, what, I was 16, 17? And I remember when I transitioned from junior high to high school, I would get these like 2-week colds. So I would be put on medicine to help. I would take the course, I would feel better. Maybe a week would go by and then I'd get sick all over again. And it was so frustrating for my parents. And if you are American, you can sympathize with the costs of going to the healthcare system. But essentially it was a very expensive time for my parents because I was healthy in every other way except for this way. So I was sick a lot and I would get cold sores all the time. So I would get sick, start to feel better, cold sore, and it was sort of like a 3-week ordeal. And when I left America to go to Korea, the job situation that I had there was extremely stressful. And I worked really, really hard. So I was a teacher there and I had 45 hours teaching hours. So if you factored in my prep and any kind of evaluation of the work that the kids did, I was regularly working 70 hours a week. And I was insanely sick. It wasn't just living in another country and being exposed to new pathogens. I was sick to the point of bronchitis and still working because I had already used up my 3 sick days. And I just kind of pushed through, and it's a wonder I only had bronchitis the one time. But I was sick probably a dozen times within 6 months. It was awful. And I would get cold sores. My boss told me it was a sign I was working hard. And I was like, okay, but I don't want to have them. And the best way to not have them is to not be sick. Now, in the 2 years following my first year working in Korea, I was just doing business stuff. I was doing YouTube tutorials. I was running my business in other capacities because importing wool and things to Korea was hard. And they didn't really have those networks set up. So I couldn't really just use what was available. So in the intervening 2 years, I worked as a fiber consultant for a yarn company in America, of all places. But my work schedule was much more relaxed. Like, I could work 5 hours a day, and I was really effective at those 5 hours. And I had a lot of downtime to do things for myself, keep my house clean, make food from scratch. I did a lot of experimentation with making bread. So, you know, I generally felt much better. So I did still have some anxiety about living in South Korea because I don't think it was really for me. But I did note that in those 2 years when I wasn't working quite as many hours and pushing myself quite as hard, I wasn't sick at all for 2 years. Like 2 whole years, not ill with anything. Then I decided, you know what, I want to go get my master's in archaeology and then my PhD in archaeology. So I made the decision to leave Korea, and then I went back to the States for a short period of time and then came to the UK. Now, if you were like me, I grew up with a blue-collar family. I didn't really get a lot of help with any of my schoolwork, and a lot of what I was learning was well beyond what my parents could really help me with by the time I was 13. So I just kind of had to figure out a lot of stuff on my own. and there wasn't really a budget for paying for any kind of tutoring, so I just had to make do. And so I had this vision of getting a doctorate, and that people who have doctorates are just smart. So of course, that was a little bit over the top, and I made myself smart in many topics that never came up in school. So, you know, it is what it is, and I'd rather have spent the time just becoming all around smart than just trying to figure out what would be good for archaeology, because I probably would have gotten it wrong in hindsight. But I decided this is the first time I'm not going to do anything else except for a degree. So all that time in early high school, I doubled down. I overloaded myself academically, so I had a lot of classes. And then as I got a little older, I then got a job. So I was doing all of this work for school. I was, you know, working 20 hours as my side job. And I was tired all the time. I got sick all the time. And when I got to my second master's, my first one I worked full-time, and I did my master's in my part-time, and I also taught martial arts 4 days a week. So it was a very challenging schedule that I was keeping. But I was 30, and I felt like now was a really good opportunity to just do my graduate school experience again, but instead of forcing myself to work to save money on the degree, I'm just going to do the degree as best as I can. And so I was really glad that I did, because I got a lot of experiences. I developed a network that I otherwise would not have been able to have. And I got a distinction, which I wasn't able to do the first time around just because I was doing so many other things. Importantly, I wasn't sick that much. Now, throughout my PhD, which I started in 2017 and I technically finished in 2022, but the bulk of my work was in 4 years, which was me taking full advantage of the program here in the UK. But one of the things that I did throughout my research was I noted in an Excel spreadsheet the day of the week, like the date, how many hours I spent researching, and what I did. And then for any kind of like bank holiday stuff, I would say I worked the bank holiday, or if I was sick, I would write down in the margin what I was sick with. So I have this log of 4 years of everything that I've done, how long it took me to do it, and in case I wondered why something took me longer to do, me putting in that note that, hey, I was sick during this period and that's why, I could then say, oh, right, so if I was sick, I probably wasn't working at my normal capacity, which sounds insane now. Because who tracks data about themselves, like, you know, like for a project like this? But anyway, it turned out to be super useful in lots of different ways. But now that I can kind of look back and see, I was sick every 3 months. I wrote down when I was really exhausted. I wrote down when I went to a conference. Those were the weeks that I worked the most. Like, I included my conference time as part of my research time because I was there doing PhD related things, and because I did a lot of conferences through my PhD. I think I did 17. I did 17 by the time I submitted in April of 2021. And then I also did, I think, 7 more after that. So yeah, it was a very ambitious period. And I would always have that week after a conference where I was incredibly run down, like I was non-functioning at that point. So being diligent with anything could be useful data. I wrote that down. And I also just kept working as if, well, the best way to keep on track is to kind of just push through it and maybe do ever so slightly less, but still keep going. And then I would get sick again. So the process would just keep repeating over and over and over. Now, when I was finished with my PhD, none of the autism discussion ever factored into my reckoning. So I never thought I was working at a disadvantage. I never thought that maybe I was just experiencing episodes of repeated, prolonged burnout. I never thought about my energy reserves quite this way. I just felt like this was normal. But it's not normal, because I would talk to other people who were less diligent about how they did their work. They would get towards the end of their PhD and panic, and then spend so much more time at the latter half of their PhD than they did at the beginning. Whereas for me, it was sort of really well paced throughout. And because I kept really good logs of how long it took for me to do things, I knew exactly, okay, I need to expand my data set. It's going to take me a week. This is what I'm going to do. This is the extra time it's going to add to my remaining timeline. This is when I can finish it by. And so because I knew all that stuff, I never got into that panic of, oh my gosh, how long is it going to take me to do? I just knew. So there were ways that I think I managed my energy levels without understanding why I might be doing it. It's just something that kind of made sense, and it was probably my saving grace, because if I hadn't done that or had the forethought to begin my PhD this way, I probably would have not completed my doctorate. So like, burnout is such a real thing for people who have experienced it. It's extremely intense. It sort of feels like your whole body is on fire. So I know I mentioned this in a video from many years ago. I think it might have been 2020. I said it felt like my whole body was inflamed, and people in the comments said, well, maybe you're eating too much sugar. I actually don't eat that much sugar. So the main source of my sugar comes from chocolate, but I eat dark chocolate, usually around 80%, and I don't eat that much. It's just like the little squares. I'll eat 2 of those, and that's it. The other source of sugar in my diet is fruit. So, you know, nature's candy. So I just didn't quite understand how all these things related at the time. But then when I finished my PhD, and I was told by a friend of mine who observed some of the things I was saying and was like, have you thought that you might be autistic? And in the last, well, going on 4 years now, I've spent a lot of time going back through various elements of my past. So I went through that initial stage of kind of being in denial, where it's like, no, this definitely isn't me. But maybe that sounds kind of similar to my past experiences, and maybe I do kind of relate to that. And so at this point, I feel like the writing is on the wall. I even found some really, really old archive video of me, I think from 2012, which would have predated my experience with putting stuff on YouTube even. I was dancing, and everyone else in the room standing perfectly still, not me. I'm just like bebopping all over the place, no music. That was just me probably being very uncomfortable in this space, not knowing how to act. And yeah, that was really funny to see. But I want to get back to the bit that I started with, which was I was incredibly sick at the start of 2025. Really the very end of 2024, but for the first month and a half or so of 2025, I was extremely ill. And when I recorded my first episode of this podcast, I talked about burnout and how I felt so overwhelmed by like processing everything and being bullied and trying to protect myself and watch what I said, and always feeling like people are watching and observing me and reporting back to others about what I'm doing, and things being twisted and distorted out of reality. And I was just exhausted. Like I felt like I had no filter left, and I needed to say something. And so I made that podcast. I want to say it was October. Sounds about right. So I made it in October. So this is before I got sick, but I was so deep into this depressed burnout cycle that really had gone on for about 2 full years. And I think my body just couldn't handle anything more. So I got really sick, like the sickest I've ever been, with the flu. And it was during that time when I was delirious with exhaustion. I could not sleep. I was in an upright position the entire time for 6 weeks. I could not sleep in the bed. I had to be on the couch, but I couldn't recline at all. Like I couldn't even just do a little bit. It was upright. So when my brain could work, I sort of looked up some random ideas that I was having, and I stumbled across some articles that talked about the way that the nasal passages are formed in autistic individuals can actually cause or like the structure of it could cause things like postnasal drip, inordinate high number of sinus infections, strep throat, like you name it, ear, nose, throat issues tend to be in a higher occurrence for these individuals, and it has to do with the way these structures are formed. So after reading that article and spending what little bit of brain cycles I had left over the 6 weeks, I sort of understood now then why I got sick so often, because I was literally healthy in so many ways. So I was regularly making trips to the doctor. The doctor couldn't find anything particularly unusually wrong about me. And it was just sort of, kids get sick. And since I was an only child, my parents didn't really have another child to compare me to. It just seemed like I was just prone to getting them. And I went through these kind of obsessive cycles when I was young, like it really started around age 11 or 12. I would start to feel better, and then I had to strip all of my bed sheets, wash everything, wash the bathroom really well, throw out my toothbrush, get a new one, like all that stuff. And it was very exhausting when I was in my recovery stage. But it was sort of, my parents didn't know that, like, what was causing me to get ill so frequently. And you know, I did all the things like covering my mouth when I coughed, being a loner child at school. I wasn't really at risk of getting sick from other people because I was never around anybody. And like, it was inexplicable. And so now with this recent research in mind, kind of going back through all of these illnesses, it makes sense. I was basically setting myself up to get sick through pushing myself academically, pushing myself with work, pushing myself with doing this and that all the time. And it just came to a head when I spent 2 years working very hard at my full-time job, working more efficiently, more effectively, being in social situations, like worked in a cafe for 10 months. That's extremely social. And then for 1.5 years, I worked in archaeology, where a lot of it was digging. So there was that. And after a little over 2 years of really pushing myself super hard, because it wasn't just that, I was also running Expert Diet. And I was trying to get my license. I was doing lessons and stuff. And then I was trying to make friends here, which I still don't have any friends here. Not really. And so, you know, it was putting a lot of pressure on myself. So, never giving myself the opportunity to just take a nap until I wake up. That sounds so simple, but it really isn't when you're living a life where you're constantly busy. There were many decisions I had to make in the last couple of years. Like, I had to leave Etsy because the fees for me were so exorbitantly high. And yes, I do have the data because I started in 2011. I think I can only go back to 2017. But I went back and I looked at all of my data from 2017 to really see what happened. And I thought it was absurd. I think it was when I did my taxes last year, so it must have been around March of 2024. I was paying almost 70% in fees of various kinds to run my business. And I was like, it's so not even worth it. And Actually Diet pays for my student loans because I still have them. They're still very expensive. And if this sounds familiar too, I'm always underpaid, and this sounds like a very elitist, entitled thing, but actually, it's not. I don't want to go into it at the moment, but if this is of interest to you and you think it would be helpful for me to talk about my financial situation over the years, I'm happy to do so. I feel like I've been quite unlucky with jobs. I just don't earn enough from my full-time job to send money to pay for student loans. So I always have to work extra. And then because I had to make that decision with Etsy, going alone with a website requires a lot more work to drive people to it. And so sales just tanked for me in general. And then I thought about other ways of dealing with that, but then I still needed to make payments to America. So I had to get a side job. So on weekends, I work part-time at a local wine shop, in addition to the full-time job that I have, and running my business in addition to all that stuff, because I feel like this is my creative outlet, but it's also an important contribution to the fiber arts community. So I don't want to just give it up. And so just finding a way to kind of make it all work has been really challenging. So it makes perfect sense why I got so run down and ill. Because of repeated burnout. So I did go see a doctor with this case of the flu, and it wasn't bacterial, so there was literally nothing that they could do for me. And then after about 9 days of sleeping, I think I slept a total of 8 hours in 9 days, which was crazy. And I was so sleep deprived, I started hallucinating. And the coughing was so bad that it triggered some kind of asthmatic response. So I struggled breathing. And they finally gave me something to help, and I probably got the first actual sleep that I had gotten in almost 10 days. But then it was short-lived. So I still really haven't recovered from this. In the videos that I have made earlier this year, you may have noticed that this part of my throat was really swollen. Is because I was coughing so much that it was just always swollen. So there was either fluid buildup or there was something where this part of my throat was just big. I had a lot of congestion, so I was constantly coughing, even when the worst of it was over and I can go back to work and everything. I still had a lot of congestion. I was constantly, you know, getting it out every morning. It was an awful experience. And I have trouble breathing, so I don't know really what to say about that, because I'm a doctor, but not that kind of doctor. And there wasn't anything assessed that would be good to compare to now. So essentially, I feel like there must have been something that happened to my lungs during this epic case of the flu, which wasn't COVID, in case you're wondering. And I was brought so low by it that I really do feel like there was some lasting impact to my body. So there will be a video of me tidying up a fleece. In that video, you can kind of hear me wheezing a bit, so I just sound... When I was sick with the flu, I was super thankful that we had a toilet on both levels, because if I had to be downstairs on the couch but then go upstairs to use the toilet all the time, I would be dead. Just the act of walking from the couch to the stairs and then up the stairs, not only would I get into a coughing fit, but I was so winded that I would get lightheaded. It was terrible. And I experienced this for the better part of 3 weeks. It did get a little bit better, but then it never really felt like I could catch my breath. In the day-to-day, it wasn't bad, but things like keeping up with children in my day job, I would notice that it was like, after not having done a whole lot. Now, as someone who used to figure skate, used to do martial arts, used to run like 10Ks or 15Ks and weightlifting, this felt like a massive blow to me, because I have been very athletic my entire life. I've not really had any periods of inactivity. I've always had like 3 or 4 days a week where I'm exercising. And so getting back into the same kind of shape has taken me a very long time. A couple months ago, I posted on my Instagram that we got a new treadmill. Now, when we moved from our last place, there was something with the circuitry of our old treadmill that must have gotten blown somehow. So I'm actually, it's right there still. We need to just get it removed, but you know, that takes time to sit down and do it. So in the past, when I've gotten from like a period of inactivity because I was sick, going back into it, I would always give myself kind of like a ramp up, which is something that you should do if you've had taken time off from being sick, or just, you know, you were on holiday for a couple of weeks and you come back. Don't try to expect you'll be right tip-top physique as when you left. But in the past, when I would have like a couple of weeks where I got really busy, or I'd be really tired, or I was just doing so many other things that is just, I would do little bits of exercise, but not necessarily something I would consider a full or normal exercise for me. But when I would get my treadmill out, it would take me a couple of sessions to get back to running a 5K in 30 minutes, which is a pretty good pace for me. Now, it had been a few months since I was able to run like that, but I was also doing weightlifting and resistance band training, so I wasn't out of shape. I just hadn't really expanded my stamina for a few months, but I didn't think it would be a massive challenge. I would just do the normal run till I felt like that was a good base. And then I would add on about 10 to 20% from that, except I could only run for about 2 minutes. And that was a bit of a surprise for me, but I thought, okay, 2 minutes? Maybe it's because I'm getting older, who knows? So I got 2 minutes in, and then the next time I got on the treadmill, it was 2 minutes, and then another 2 minutes. I think the first time I was on the treadmill for a total of 10 minutes, and I felt like I was dying. It was difficult to breathe, and I thought maybe it's just because it's been much longer than like a much longer break than I really have experienced in my life. And so I thought, okay, well, maybe it's that. But I have to tell you, it has been 2 months of regularly running with the treadmill. And yesterday, I got to my first 10 minutes of nonstop running. And it wasn't even at the same speed I used to run at. So now I have to be really mindful of my lungs, because I will go from being able to run just fine to, if I don't get off this thing right now and just focus on breathing, I'm going to hyperventilate and cry. So I've clearly experienced something with my illness that, in conjunction with the other elements, things like burnout, having to expend a lot of energy just to make enough money to pay for everything, it's really taken a toll on me. And living in the UK, I do not have access to public funds, so everything is me. Like, I have to come up with everything, which doesn't help the feeling of, well, I should just recover. I can't just recover. I have to keep working. Well, maybe just do less. But I can't do less. I just have to keep going. And it makes the recovery process take even longer. So essentially, I wanted to do this video, this podcast, because there are probably people out there who are in my same boat, and it doesn't just suck, it is life-stealing. I want to just come home from work and only have to worry about dinner. I want to have my weekends free all the time. I don't. I'm always thinking about what I need to do to save money. So like baking bread it's not me trying to say, oh, look at me, I'm so fancy, or I'm so domesticated, or literally, I upskilled in making sourdough because I love eating it. It's really good for my digestive tract, which is another thing that could talk about in the future. I've definitely listened to other autistic people discuss their GI issues, and I have found that sourdough really does help improve my system. And because of where I live, it is exorbitant. It's £6.60, which for those of you who don't use the British pound, that's like $9 for a loaf of sourdough. And I just cannot afford that. So what I used to do in Korea, because it was expensive and kind of a faff to go and get it, the money was there, so it wasn't like a big deal. I could just afford it. I thought, oh, it'll be fun for me to learn how to do this. Now it feels like if I want to have decent bread, I have to make it. And I can choose to go without, that's true. But at the end of the day, there's also the issue of highly processed foods, and I don't want to expose myself to things that I could prevent. Because I've always been thinking about the next decade of my life. So even though I'm 40, I'm thinking about, well, when I'm 50, I want to have a good 50, not one where I'm already dealing with a bunch of challenging health concerns. She said in the episode, literally talking about her health. So, you know, I do these things not because I have oodles of time, but it saves money and it gets me sort of a quality of life situation. And at the end of the day, I want to have as high a quality of life as I can manage. And to do so, it means, well, on Saturdays, I do all of my bread prep for the week. And it's not like it's time consuming, but it does mean that I have to plan to do something every week. And there are certain periods of the day where I can't just run out of the house for a few hours because I have to come back and do things to the sourdough. So, yeah, and even making stuff from wool, it's not to sound like I'm elite, that I've got all of these things that are handmade that I did that, you know, took so many hours to make. I do it, well, I started doing it because I enjoyed it, but also I was broke. I didn't have any money. So yeah, despite working full time back then, I still didn't really have any money to engage in hobbies. So I was an avid knitter, but the cost of yarn was so high that I just took my experience from my first master's, where I did a bunch of things with alpaca and natural dyeing, and I kind of ran with it, and then that's sort of how Exploit Dyed came about anyway, so aren't you glad that I did? But it was literally to solve a problem where I felt like I couldn't afford to engage in this hobby, but I also had an interest in using my master's degree, which, because of the 2008 collapse, the museum sector was completely screwed over. So it was not likely to happen for me, and it still hasn't happened. But I wanted to take parts of that master's degree and actually use it for something. So I was interested in outreach, still am, that's why I continue to do it. So I thought, how can I continue using part of that degree? How can I shift or spin it so that it still felt like it was being useful for me and it made a lot of sense? Take the knowledge, apply it to business. Done. And it solved a lot of problems at the time because it did pay for a lot of my student loans. And I got to disseminate my knowledge to others. I was contributing to the list of products that would be available made out of wool, not just acrylic. And I got a lot of enjoyment out of it. So yeah, just sometimes the way that we satisfy certain concerns in our lives can be misconstrued, and it's really frustrating whenever that happens, because just because I do something doesn't mean it's for the luxury of doing it. It's sometimes because I have these other motivations in mind. So yeah, not having been super healthy the start of this year has had massive ramifications on everything that I've done. So I'm still recovering financially from being sick for so long. I did work, but there were a lot of extras I couldn't do. I am still on my back foot trying to catch back up, so I've not been able to create new products, update my website very much. So I've done a couple of blog posts, not a lot though. And there's a bunch of wool, like you can't really see, but there's a bunch of wool that needs to be carded and photographed and then put on the website to be sold, because right now it's taking up space. But I've only just recovered financially. I have mostly recovered my health, still, as I pointed out, clearly a work in progress. I'll probably get back to my normal running speed by the end of this year. That's a decent projection, which, you know, I kind of have to deal with that. And hope that my current situation does not give me more forms of burnout, because I'm splitting myself in a lot of different ways. And the other thing I didn't even get a chance to mention through social media yet, I won an award to do a small research grant, and I've been busy doing that in the background because I only have so much time to get things done, and that timeline keeps going. So I've not been able to focus much about presenting this publicly because I'm just getting on with doing the research. So I'm hoping in the latter half of this year things will get much better. But I really felt like I wanted to contextualize my illness, because it seems to be something that a lot of autistics also experience in their lives. And so I will leave a link in the description below for one of the articles that I found that I think should be open access, to give it a read. And as part of my therapy, just kind of understanding why I've gone through these periods of being ill like this. It's really just about understanding how all these things relate, and then finding ways to solve little bits where the summation is sufficient to then feel like you're not overdoing it, or you're not splitting yourself up too much, that, you know, you can tell yourself, I'm not doing that right now. I will do it later, right? I don't like looking at clutter at all. So this room is gone through periodic tidy up sessions since I was sick. I would come up here and look at it and get so stressed out because I anticipated using my holiday time to deal with it. So I just kind of threw things here, and I was like, I'm going to deal with that in a couple of weeks, and then I never got to it. And then 2 months later, it's like, well, now I've got even more accumulation I got to deal with. So, yeah, I'm hoping that this will be useful in my future discussions about why I think I'm autistic. I hope. So yeah, there were some other little things over the years, like I remember getting an EKG done because I would get these really bad heart palpitations. And I thought that I was having like tiny heart attacks. I forget what they're called. I should tag Dr. Mike in to help me. But they weren't worrying to the point where it was like I need to go to the hospital, but it was concerning enough that I definitely needed some intervention from a medical doctor. And so I remember wearing EKG machines for like a couple of weeks to just document everything. And doctors were like, we didn't see anything, everything's normal, you're fine, you might just be a little bit stressed, so try to find ways to de-stress. And I was like, huh, okay, sure. like I know how to become less stressed. I still don't. There were other things like a doctor thought, oh, maybe you have allergies. So I went through this whole expensive allergy test situation, which cost a fortune. I am allergic to nothing in America, apparently. I don't have any of the most common allergies. And then what else did I get done? I think I had, like, my eyes have been checked numerous times because I would complain about fatigue, so that I don't have any like scratches. I don't have like a slipped cornea, nothing weird there. I even got an eye test done more recently just to confirm, no, my eyes are totally fine. And like eye sensitivity, I complained about since childhood. I cannot stand a sunny day. I'm always squinting like this. It's a wonder I don't have more crow's feet here. But for 25 to 30 years of my life, just regularly going to the doctor's office, being told this is normal, there's nothing wrong with you, or we don't know why she keeps having these sinus infections, we'll just kind of deal with them as they come up and hope she grows out of it. I haven't grown out of it. It's just they come in similar frequency with similar results, and in the case of my most recent episode with the flu, it's basically pushed the clock back on my health for the year. So for those of you who like long videos, I hope you enjoyed the length of this video. I kid, but in all honesty, I never would have put two and two together had I not read enough testimonials from other people who were autistic, who had gone through similar experiences, to think, well, maybe there is something here. And doing the research and looking at how that research might explain some of my past, like, does this coincide? Is it congruent? Does it follow? Does it make sense? And evaluating it critically, because I don't want to have a condition that I don't have. And I don't want to say that I have it if I don't actually have it. Many people who find that these things resonate with them, it gives them a sense of hope that, okay, I can latch on to this idea, and it sort of explains why things are happening in their lives the way that they are. Everything seems to kind of fit into place, but because it's such a complex topic, it doesn't really help to say that you are or you aren't based on this one thing, because it's about everything in context. It's about all parts of your life. It's about, you know, various aspects of like social development or illness, or just all these things matter when it comes to the discussion. And even during an assessment, which I gather is somewhere up to 2 hours, that's not really a lot of time to tease all this stuff out. But then a lot of people who get a diagnosis, they don't know what to do afterwards. Like, how do I care for myself in a way where I don't get burnout, where I don't get crippling anxiety, where I feel fulfilled, where I can work a job even. You know, I've been quite lucky that I've almost always been in full-time employment, but there are some jobs I realize that I cannot do only because they drain me so much that I can't actually recover. And the challenge is finding what's going to work for me, not because I can't do the job, but because I need a job that allows me to like recover on a day-to-day basis, where I'm not having to deal with petty stuff that is not necessary. It should not be in a workplace, but it is. And so, yeah, I think it's important to have this discussion and to put it out there, even though I'm mainly interested in how it impacts me and what it means for me. Having another testimonial out there can also cause discussion to happen. So maybe you had been following my tutorials for years, happened across these and was like, that's interesting. It's interesting you say that. That sounds kind of familiar. Or, you know, others who are in the same boat as me in their 40s and realizing things about themselves because now they've got kids. I don't have children, but I do have a very surprisingly autistic-like cat. Oh my goodness. You know, you sort of begin to see parts of yourself in your children, and then you see, well, let's get them assessed. And, you know, because it's genetic, it often can sort of be present in you. Maybe not in the same way, maybe not as strongly, or maybe there's, you know, elements of the spectrum that we're still not, you know, fully cognizant of. And, you know, all of this contributes to that collective knowledge that even researchers will look at this as important information to help them with their diagnostic process. So, you know, I think putting this out there in the way that I have has been good for me to kind of organize my thoughts. And so when it does come time for me to have my assessment, I can have all of this information I've compiled where I can have, you know, rapid fire discussion points of what I think, you know, my experiences are that relate to this, and to, you know, use that to have the discussion. But even if it doesn't, then at least I've kind of talked about some things that I find like motivate my reasons for being in fiber arts, because this conversation would not have gone this smoothly. There'd be so many more cuts had I not been doing something at the same time. So I hope this podcast was useful for you to listen to, that like me, you had something to listen to while you did something else, whether it was cooking, dishes, cleaning, spinning, weaving, whatever, you know, activities you like to engage in with podcasts. Those are basically the ones I like to, as well as exercise. So I listen to Critical Role all the time while I'm exercising. So yeah, I don't know when I'm going to come out with another episode. There are other things that I'd like to talk about, but I need to think about what I want to say, because even when I am in front of a camera, I do generally have loads that I end up talking about. I don't want to spend a lot of time editing it like I did in the first episode, because that took me way too long to do. So if I spend some time thinking about what I want to talk about and then sit down to film it, it'll be much more smooth process than me kind of being all over the place. So if you've got any other themes or topics, or, you know, have you experienced this, or, you know, can you weigh in on that? It might be really useful, actually, because I'm very responsive to my environment. I don't know if that's one of the things, but even though I can be very spontaneous, I definitely let things happen around me and I observe them and then I comment, or then I do, or then I respond. It's probably one of the reasons why I love watching tutorials. Even though I might never make something. What did I watch the other day? I watched someone, because I'm doing all the DIY for the house. I wondered, what does putting a hardwood floor in entail? So I just watched a couple of hours over a couple of days how to install a wood floor. So I know how to do it. Will I? Probably not, but it was great fun. I'm so glad that I did it. So if you like this video and you want to be notified of when the next one comes out, please subscribe and click that notifications icon, the little bell, so that you are notified. Sometimes you are, sometimes you're not. But otherwise, I will see you in the next video, whichever that might be. Might be a podcast, it might be a tutorial, it might be a daily vlog that isn't very daily, but whatever it is, I will see you then. Thanks for watching. Bye!